Okay, we're back. It's HAF Reacts. We're a day early because something happened. A certain group and coalition of groups didn't like something we said about Nikhil Gupta pleading to trying to assassinate a certain member of the Khalistan separatist movement. And some things we said were taken entirely out of context, I think entirely knowingly by this group and coalition of people. But we wanted to respond to that. So, Samir, cue us up. Oh, but before we get to that, we've also been told we swear too much. So we're all going to be on our best behavior, making no non-veg jokes this time. Although I think Samir wants to reply to one of them, maybe. Yes? No?
All right. I promise to be in my best behavior today. So I just wanted to start out by just, acknowledging that I perhaps made some inappropriate comparisons between certain professions and this whole, assassination plot of a Khalistan proponent. And it was inappropriate to make those comparisons. So, bad on me. At the same time, I also want to say that there was a whole lot of feigned outrage from organizations such as the Sikh Coalition. First of all, they completely took everything that we said out of context and tried to allege that what we were saying was unethical and unprofessional. First of all, humor, satire, and wit and sarcasm has always been used as part of political commentary, particularly geopolitical commentary. And while maybe we went a little bit far in that note, I think what we said in the larger context of that Reacts video was completely on the mark. And the outrage that came from groups like the Sikh Coalition, it was nothing new. It's part of a pattern. It's on brand for the Sikh Coalition. And this is dating back more than a decade. And something that I have personally encountered, others at the organization have encountered, where they use bullying and intimidation tactics to try to silence individuals because they say things that they makes them feel uncomfortable, particularly about the Khalistan movement, which brings up the question, why are they so uncomfortable with that? And why have they not condemned Khalistani extremism and violence in the past and ongoing incidents? And if I were to look back at my history here at HAF, back in 2014, for instance, a Sikh Coalition staffer personally called me and threatened to sue me for defamation because I wrote an article in The Hill that basically called out his overgeneralized stereotypes about Indians. And I called it racist, and it absolutely was. And as a side note, in that article, he completely whitewashed the misdeeds of the Khalistan movement and its violent extremism in the past as well. Around that same time, there were incidents where, in our efforts to improve the understanding and depiction of Indians and Hindus and Indian history in the California textbooks, we were accused of whitewashing or erasing Sikh history. And they even ran a whole fundraising campaign off of us. And what did we say? Oh, we had the audacity to say that Dalip Singh Sond was an Indian. Oh my God. Horrible. I know. But something he himself acknowledges and in his own memoirs. So again, the pattern is building, as you can see. Fast forward several years, and when we get into these conversations about the Khalistan movement, they have misrepresented what we've said or made claims that our discussion on specifically the Khalistan movement and the misdeeds of that movement and individuals associated with that movement somehow was anti-Sikh. And we have been making broad-based statements about Sikhs in general, which couldn't be further from the truth. All they have to do is go and watch those videos or clips or other things. For example, one conversation I had with Michael Rubin, who is a well-known and respected expert on geopolitics, about the Khalistan movement, again, was taken to basically make slanderous claims that we were anti-Sikh. And they even tried to silence Michael Rubin and tried to get him to retract some articles that he had written. So again, the pattern doesn't just involve, people at HAF, but involves many others that they just don't like to hear what they say because it challenges their narratives, where they try to simplify this issue as just one of the Indian government coming after innocent Sikhs in the US. And again, for the record, which we have said over and over again, we are against transnational oppression. We do not condone it in any way. At the same time, there should be condemnation of those that are proponents of the Khalistan movement for what they have said and what they have done. Simple as that. And if the Sikh Coalition can't do that, that's on them. That's not on us. What we clearly said in the last Reacts video was two things can be equally true. Panu, Gurbatuan Singh Panu, could have been the victim or was the victim of that assassination plot, and at the same time has said some horrendous thing, and is being has been looked at as involved in terrorist activities. Okay, so are you, or do you agree with his statements about Hindus should go back to India, or his violent threats? You know, it's a simple question for the Sikh Coalition. You know, you can say that you're against transnational oppression and at the same time condemn his statements, but nope, that's never come out. Their materials have clearly whitewashed the history and the activities of the Khalsa movement as if it never existed. There was never any violent terrorism or any extremist activities that were committed by proponents of the Khalsa movement, or that there aren't designated organizations in the U.S. So let's save the feigned outrage and the moral superiority. Okay, the game is very clear. They have been manipulating what we have said to make it seem that it's about the Sikh community more broadly, when it has always been about the Khalistan movement, and it always will be, and about our concerns about TNR bills and policies that are overly broad and would basically demonize entire communities and strip us of our rights and subject us to enhanced scrutiny and surveillance. Simple as that. So if they think that them kind of trying to shame us or shame me and drag my name through the mud is going to somehow have me stop speaking out on the Khalistan movement, I'm so sorry to disappoint you, but it's not going to happen. If they think that I'm going to stop speaking out and condemning this type of activity, again, you're deeply mistaken. And let's not forget about their other organizations that also were concerned about our Reacts video, like Hindus for Human Rights. This is an organization that claims to represent the Hindu American community, yet they went out of their way and publicly advocated against a hate crime committed against a Hindu temple in Queens, New York, that it should not be prosecuted as a hate crime, even though it was inherently targeting Hindu temple just because it involved Khalistani speech or anti-Modi speech. Well, guess what? Hindus for Human Rights, it still is considered a hate crime if you're targeting a Hindu place of worship. And you should be ashamed of yourself if you're going to say that that is not a hate crime. You're going to publicly advocate against that. So I have no respect for the tactics, the cheap publicity stunts and tactics that these organizations use, and it's not going to silence us. It's not going to bully us, and we're going to continue. And now I'm getting off my soapbox because I just got a call from HR that I need to wrap it up.
That was
You mean I just gave you that look because I was like, Samir,
I
you seem to
know.
be getting a
I
little
think we both
emotional.
texted him at the same time. I just want to add that Hindus for Human Rights was literally cheering the unprecedented and historic raid of the BAPS temple. And, what came out of it after 5 years of, dragging their reputation and name in the mud? Nothing. And so you have this organization on the one hand championing the surveilling and the raiding of a Hindu institution. On the other hand, you have Sikh Coalition partnering with Hindus for Human Rights, even though their law enforcement policy principles say, and I'm going to say here in what they have quoted on their website, that they endorse policies that end profiling of specific communities at all levels of policing, including improper surveillance, except that they've been advocating for exactly the opposite thing with SB, what was it, 503, and with
509.
with 509, 403, 509, they all kind of blur in terms of the one thing they have in common, which is let's single out and target and surveil and ethnically police the Indian American community and specifically Hindu Americans. So for these two organizations to come together on this hypocritical virtue signaling letter is no surprise.
Yeah, and let's just add that after that case was dismissed by the DOJ against the BAPS Mandir in New Jersey, both Hindus for Human Rights and Sikh Coalition signed on to a letter to basically continue to pursue action against them. So I guess they do support these types of raids and actions against religious communities and places of worship. I don't know. I'm confused. I'm very
Only if they're
confused.
Hindu. Only if
It's
they're
all
Hindu.
theatrics. They're it's like a cheap. They're cheap campaign
There's
stunts,
also
right?
there's one more tool in their toolbox that they use, and that is using disagreement as a reason to demonize legitimate Hindu American advocacy and then get them canceled or excluded out of really important important and critical coalitions, whether it's civil rights coalitions, Department of Justice task forces, or religious freedom coalitions. We've seen them use this type of tactic over and over again, where they take a disagreement that's actually rooted in like Indian politics. Quite honestly, if you want a separate homeland, we'll fight for it in that homeland. And that's going to include you're going to need 2 passports or 2 visas, one for Pakistan and one for India, because Punjab actually is in both countries, and fight for it there. But don't bring those politics here and actually put in harm's way all brown communities who actually need to be kept safe right now, where there's unprecedented abuse of government power against our communities.
Yeah. Can I ask you both, Samir and Suhag, a question? Because I've discussed this actually. I mentioned this to a member of the coalition who I met at an event. Hypothetically, if Hindu temples weren't being attacked and we didn't see this anti-Hindu rhetoric in the US, from an organizational perspective, would we take on Khalistan? Because to me, it feels like, as Suhag said, it's an issue for India, but it's being brought here because we see Hindus being attacked. We see Hindu temples being attacked. If that wasn't the case, would you think about it differently from an organizational perspective?
I mean, I certainly would. It falls within the realm of free speech. You can say and do whatever you want, hold every referendum you want. But why is it that every time there's a referendum, there's a temple attack happening on U.S. soil? That is the problem. So if Sikh Coalition wants to promote separatism, go right ahead, but then call on the supporters that are out there, call on the broader community to stop the attacks on Hindu targets. And that it doesn't just include Hindu temples, it includes individuals as well. And also just the horrible rhetoric online. We know that researchers have found that there's a direct correlation between spikes of online hatred to on-ground violence. So call it out, and we can work together on other issues that are actually impacting our communities here in America, and not dragging the politics of India here.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think, there's a couple pieces to this. I think one, if you want to just advocate for your separate state, fine. But first of all, be intellectually honest about it. Don't be intellectually dishonest about it and about the facts of what's actually happened. That's number one. So if you want to do that in a vacuum, have at it. Okay. But as Suhag mentioned, we are absolutely going to speak out against a movement that has led to violence. We're absolutely going to speak out against a movement that uses U.S. soil to fundraise and provide material support for terrorist activities in India, which has been documented, and there have been several arrests, including in recent years, of individuals associated with Khalistani terrorist groups here that have been arrested for such activities. And number three, we're going to continue to be concerned and speak out when this rhetoric, this hateful rhetoric, continues to lead to policies that are attempting to suppress our rights as Americans through these transnational repression bills and policies that we see popping up across the country. And how do we know that? Because we actually approached this issue in California in a very open manner, and we were willing to actually negotiate, to make amendments to the bill, many of whom were rejected. I wonder by whom, to actually make it, we would have allowed the bill to go through if some of those amendments had been, all those amendments had been accepted, that would have just basically blunted the harm that it could have caused to our community. But no, they were rejected. Even when the author's office was willing to take them, somehow they magically got rejected. So there is, there are a lot of other issues here that we're concerned about. If you want to advocate for Khalistan in a vacuum, though, that's fine. Nobody cares about that. But when it leads to other activities, and when we see Khalistan, like the Khalistan movement wrapped up with organized crime, yeah, we're going to be concerned about that. We're going to speak out about that kind of stuff.
I mean, I'm coming into HAF, much later than the rest of you. So, I mean, would it be fair to say that even on the issue of transnational repression, I mean, that is not a topic in and of itself that is within the HAF scope of work, and had that campaign not really, featured sort of HAF as Indian agents, Hindu Americans and Indian agents, Hindu temples being political targets, because they are Indian agents. Like, if that had never been part of the equation, would even that specific topic have been something that you would have wanted to spend your time on? because like we have this huge list of things we want to do, and I don't think the people that founded HAF were founded it with this dream of like being able to thwart transnational repression laws or stymie the Khalistan movement. It was to advocate for the civil rights of Hindus, and as the Hindu American Foundation, the types of religious freedom we pursue, as a community of millions of individuals representing a vast range of diverse traditions from India, right? That is also those are also things that we would also see as beneficial to other communities as well. Like when we have voiced opposition to TNR bills, like that, where that is coming from is this is not only something that could impact Hindu Americans or Indian Americans, but the types of things we are talking about could be bad for everyone, right? Like you could have tomorrow the Chinese American Foundation, if assuming one that exists, where they oppose a TNR law, and then you have some other coalition that calls in, oh well, why are you opposing this? You clearly are only doing this because you're Chinese agents. And then the day after that, it could be the Saudi Arabian American Foundation, right? And same thing, right? These are not intrinsically Indian or Hindu issues. TNR is a very vast topic. It is very specialized, and the veto of SB 509, those reasons were not intrinsically Indian reasons either, right?
Yeah, that's all
Yeah,
correct,
I
Raj.
hear that.
I'd much rather spend my time on promoting Diwali bills that helps Hindu American families actually be able to, take a holiday off for Diwali in schools rather than dealing with this nonsense. But this nonsense is thrust upon us. And when it's thrust upon us, we are going to make sure that we are protecting the best interests of the Hindu American community. And unfortunately, that involves getting involved in advocacy around these bills. I mean, I've gone on the record multiple times at hearings and testimony, written testimony on TNR bills, and not once have I ever justified or said anything in support of any types of transnational repression, etc. So the record is very clear, and we know what's being done here, right? It's a manipulation of words. It's a manipulation of this feigned outrage to make it seem like we're anti-Sikh, which is absolutely couldn't be further from the truth again. And so, yeah, we'd much rather spend our time doing something else rather than this.
Do you think it's feigned outrage, though? I think for some times, but some of the online comments feel pretty genuine.
Well, I'm talking about the organizations that are promoting this, right? Like from the Sikh Coalition, right? They're using this to drum up. They're basically trying to like drum up, the base, right? They're trying to get the base outrage, and it's working, right? People are saying crazy shit on there. Oh, I guess I used my one.
You used your one.
Right. Done.
They're saying crazy stuff out there in response to all these things, right? I mean, this stuff is pretty disgusting. So if we want to talk about like unprofessional and unethical stuff, we should be looking at that.
Well, the other thing is that it's so clear there's not even a border or a boundary or a line between anti-Indian hatred and anti-Hindu. Like, what do slurs like cow piss drinking or cow dung eater or whatever else? The anti-Brahmin comments are also a favorite of these Khalistanis. Like, it doesn't take more than like even 3 seconds to realize that this is not just a national or ethnic hatred that's amongst the people that we're seeing online, but it's a deeply religious hatred.
Again, like the other thing, and Samir, you mentioned this earlier, like, and you've interacted, all of you have interacted with these people, right? These organizations, for many years. You have, have you not collaborated in the past? Like, have you not had them over for tea and cookies or,
Yeah, I've
whatever?
when it comes to Hindus for Human Rights, yes, I personally know several of them. Back in the day, yeah, we collaborated with a precursor to Hindus for Human Rights on a number of issues. And how long ago was that, Suhag? When did it all go bad?
Feel like it was 2014. Um,
You think that far? Huh.
I think so. Yeah. 2014, 2015, when they decided to essentially import their political grievances against the government of India and specifically the BJP to US soil. I think that's when things went south. That's where, when you start dragging foreign politics into domestic issues, it makes it virtually impossible to work together.
It does seem very personal, to be
Yeah.
honest, right?
I think there's mental health issues, quite honestly. Like, I just don't know how you can be so driven by misinformation and like build this, bogeyman in your head about, oh, this is the absolute most evil presence in the United States, and we need to, channel all our millions of dollars of dark money or hundreds of thousands of dark money towards trying to bring this organization down. Forget the fact that this is an organization that's supported by thousands of Hindu Americans of all political stripes, of all religious stripes across the country. That is just an inconvenient reality or fact.
To wrap this up here a little bit, to me, one of the things that is just so egregious in everything we've had to deal with in the past 36 hours is the obvious nature of how badly it was clipped. And they took something that was an obvious joke. If you didn't know that was a joke, frankly, you're stupid. You just are. That was obvious satire, that we were saying that it was one bad what the Indian government did, according to this confession, this this deal with Nikhil Gupta, and we were saying they did it badly. Those are two things against the Indian government. We're agreeing with these people that have it in for the Indian government for once, and we still get attacked. I don't get it. It's like I'm up to here.
Yeah, go,
Yeah,
Raj. Go.
I mean, just to be very clear, what was said the other time was one, that whether Panoon was engaging in speech promoting the independent state of Khalistan, or was actually engaging in some sort of criminal act, against India, whatever the case, whatever the case, India has no right. India has no jurisdiction on U.S. soil, and Panoon isn't a U.S. citizen. And so if Panoon is, implicated of a crime, then he would be subject to due process and equal protection, just like any other American, right? The second thing we said, and this is where, Samir's reference to more alternative professions came into play, and that was that it was not that India failed or in its mission. To be clear, that was absolutely not what we were saying. What we were saying was India, if you look at the DOJ release, which said that Vikash Yadav, who was affiliated with the General Secretariat, and he hired this Nikhil Gupta to go on to hire an undercover DEA agent to kill Panoon, that was a not only extremely stupid risk, like that really sort of is a bad look for, in multiple ways, right? Because it shows an amateur operation. It shows that they were willing to take this huge risk on someone that they had not demonstrated was an imminent security threat, in a US standard. Because again, like India doesn't try and convict people here. If, you are plotting a terrorist attack on US soil, that is something that the US authorities arrest and prosecute, through an evidence-based process. Right. And so actually that kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier, whether we are, kind of agreeing that yes, it was unacceptable what India did, right? And the words are twisted, which is unfortunate. In prior, cases, it was, far more, at least what I would consider maybe innocuous. Like I'm sure I would not be surprised that other organizations disagree with how we characterize things. But I think, just from, our own perspective, it's like, what exactly is the threshold for unacceptable conduct? Right? Because when a law enforcement training is transnational repression, when saying that
Soft transnational
soft transnational repression, right?
It's hard
When saying
repression.
Bengalis or Sikhs or Indians or what have you are part of some broader community, if that is a very offensive thing, meriting a press release and whole kerfuffle, or whether it's a twisted quote regarding a specific institution, which again, we're not in the business of investigating drugs or organized crime, right? We like that is not like unless it is something that is directly implicating to like a Hindu American security issue or rights issue, like why would we? There are other organizations, not to mention professional law enforcement, who deal with that. So I think that's really, going forward, right? Because we're here to stay. We're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. They're, in a place like California, the communities are, roughly equal, the numbers, right, are, you know, pretty comparable, right? If Sikhs in California, Hindus in California. So it's like, what is this doing for the dialogue, right? Because again, like, I don't think most Hindu Americans are waking up in the morning thinking about how to, you know, advance India's national security, interests or prevent secession of Indian territories or what have you. We set up to make fluffy videos about Hindu dance and what karma is, or whether Hindus are polytheistic or monotheistic or something else entirely, right? I mean, those are the things that people were interested in. This is not. So where do we go from here? What is that standard?
Yeah. And I think that is the major distinguishing factor for us as an organization. We're comfortable in gray. We're comfortable with nuance. We're comfortable in saying two things can be equally true. But for organizations like the Sikh Coalition, they're not. They're clearly not, because they can't acknowledge or admit certain facts, because it doesn't play into their narratives. It's inconvenient. For us, we're more than willing to condemn certain acts and at the same time say other acts are unacceptable as well. And I think that actually is the epitome of being a professional organization, some inconvenient language notwithstanding. But, so I think if people actually are objective about this, they would actually be able to look behind the propaganda, behind the social media clips, and actually really understand what's going on here.
We're at 29 minutes or roughly half hour. Suhag, you want to close us out here as executive director? So what do you have?
I mean, I was just going to say that, especially in this moment when there's just unprecedented anti-immigrant sentiment and rhetoric, and even threats of policies being passed, or at least widespread calls to deport all Indians. This is a time that we need to come together and build coalitions. And certainly, I know that in the religious freedom space, we have partnered with organizations and institutions that we don't agree with on many things, but we can find those things that we do agree on, like the separation of church and state or religious freedom. And so I would hope, and I know that everyone always thinks that I'm kind of, Pollyannish and very optimistic and, all those horrible things. But I think that, we should be able to find those issues that we can work together on, like repairing our broken immigration system, or ensuring that everyone has equal protection and due process under the law, regardless of what they look like or where they came from or what their last name is. So there are really critical issues that we are facing as Americans. So if you have political grievances that are in, thousands of miles away, I welcome you to fight them there. But here, there's very important issues that need our attention. And I'd rather spend time on that than this sort of garbage.
Okay, let's leave it there. We'll be back next week probably. And Samir, you use one cuss word, so you get one next week. Raj, you get two. Suhag, you get two, and I get two.
I'm gonna bank them,
Okay,
so that I
I'm
can,
gonna hold them up.
at the end of the year, I'm just gonna the entire stream.
Okay, it's
But
gonna be.
it'll be in a professional tone, and it will be employed to advance a professional point that would be very insightful.
I wish you best in all your future business adventures. See you.
Yuck, yuck.